Welcome to Marketing Brew Weekly, Morning Brew Inc.'s podcast for the marketing industry. I'm Jenny Mywin.
I'm Katie Hicks.
And I'm Kelsey Sutton.
So you guys, I have something kind of deep and dark to confess to you, and that is that I recently got sucked into a microdrama.
Oh, tell us more.
It happens. It really, so I don't know if everyone's aware of what a microdrama is, but it really is the most dramatic, most soap opera-y form of content possible, primarily on vertical video, social feeds. There are dedicated microdrama apps as well. And I don't think I would be offending anyone by calling them bad. They are not meant
intentionally
to be
bad.
Good. Yeah, the one that I particularly watched was literally about mermaids and death and betrayal, and it was probably AI generated, and it was just kind of nonsensical, but I couldn't stop watching, and I thought that I was immune because I've been keeping an eye on it for research purposes for a while, because the conversation about microdramas has largely been about how they're really arriving in the US. They're a format that was very popular in China at first, and now they are increasingly popular in the US, and they finally got me. They sucked me in. I thought I was just looking at it from a purely scientific perspective, but I could only stay away for so long.
You get a little brain rot every now and then as a treat, you know?
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. It happens to the best of us.
Had to happen. But as they become more common, I really am convinced that kind of any brand can get involved with a microdrama if they so choose, mainly because there are so many different ways to do it, whether that's creating one, sponsoring one, dipping a toe in. There's a lot of ways to get into it. But first, growth is more than just a buzzword that CEOs love to throw around. It's also really important for plants, influencers, and of course, subscription streaming services.
And there just happens to be one streaming platform that's really pulling ahead of the rest.
Paramount Plus is the fastest growing subscription streaming service for 3 years in a row, which means that more and more eyes are glued to Paramount Plus every single year.
And you can tap into that giant growing audience with Paramount Ads Manager.
Paramount Ads Manager can help you target specific demographics like age, income, zip code, and niche interests and behaviors. Then run retargeting campaigns to reconnect with past viewers or website viewers back on the big screen.
Don't have a TV ad? Their team can help you make one at no additional charge.
Get your brand on the platform that's growing fast at ParamountAdsManager.com. That's ParamountAdsManager.com.
So Jenny I would like to hear a little bit about this thesis that any brand can and should be making a microdrama. What are some of the biggest factors here? Because it's not so easy to just make one out of nothing.
It is making content at the end of the day, right? So it has to be something that you are interested in. But I think the most convincing factor for me is that they are incredibly inexpensive to make, especially if you're comparing it to something like a full-length feature film or even just other forms of episodic content, especially if it's on TV, but even for social, depending on what the production is. In my reporting, I came across from a producer who said that the average cost for an entire microdrama series ranges from $30,000 to $300,000.
Oh my God. And that could be 100 episodes, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. That's kind of the nature of these things, right? They have 80 plus episodes.
That's a classic microdrama. And I will get to it in a sec, but the way that brands primarily are getting into them, I don't think most brands are creating 80 plus episodes, but I think that's kind of the beauty of where we are with microdramas as a content format right now, is that it's pretty loosey-goosey. You can kind of call something a microdrama and no one's really gonna bat an eye if you kind of hit one or two of the check boxes. But yeah, the cost of it, an entire series being so low, is really just a very low barrier to entry. And when I think about brands wanting to test and wanting to kind of seem like they're in the know, it's such an easy way to just be well, why not,
I think that testing is such an interesting part of this, because so many brands need to be iterating on ideas and finding what sticks. And I feel a microdrama is a really interesting way to do that, because you can kind of try out characters or brand angles, and there's so many episodes, or even if you do 5 or 6 episodes or 10 episodes, you kind of can get a lot, you can learn a lot potentially from that. Does a certain character, a certain way that the brand shows up in content resonate really well? Does that make sense to then kind of spin that into something else? But I don't know, Jenny is that how it's being viewed, or is it kind of this whole thing in and of itself? It's not really designed to be borrowed from for like a traditional TV ad or something like that.
Right. Well, I think that's kind of the beauty is that depending on how you kind of approach making a microdrama, it can live on a lot of different platforms, right? So there are dedicated microdrama apps like Real Short and Drama Box that are exploding in popularity, and you can find an audience there that is really, really used to this format, really dedicated to it. Like they won't roll their eyes at kind of the ridiculousness of it, and you can kind of really connect with them in a way that they are already expecting. And then you can do it on a regular social platform, which I think like a TikTok, like a YouTube Shorts, like an Instagram Reels, primarily short form vertical still. And I think that can be really attractive for a brand that already has a strong social presence and doesn't want to build an entirely new one. And it kind of, it's not that like the microdrama format is only makes sense on the dedicated apps either, because even something like a TikTok is testing a microdrama feed within the app. That's how I actually got sucked in. I was just scrolling TikTok and it comes up in your scroll, and it's something called Pine Drama, but it's a separate feed that you're still in the TikTok ecosystem. So it's interesting that you can kind of straddle the lines of both worlds. And I'm curious how brands are kind of thinking about the different audiences on these platforms and whether it's worth it to pursue new ones or test it on something that they already have.
That's something I was thinking about with like the discoverability of this, because obviously like the way you discovered that one on TikTok, there are also some like P&G made one. It was called the Golden Parafair, and it was like 50 episodes, and they put it on its own dedicated platform or its own dedicated website. And I tried to access it and I couldn't get in. I don't know why. Something was going wrong. But
wow.
I was like, okay, I guess I'm never going to watch this. And I looked it up and it wasn't on any other social platform. So I'm like, I wonder how many people are not watching this because it's not on social. So in your opinion, do you feel like it's better to put it on social versus its own dedicated thing, or like a microdrama platform?
I would say why not both? You know, like I think the discoverability of a classic social platform is something that people are used to. But I think when you put it on a dedicated microdrama app, you kind of are nodding to the fact that you're like, I know where this comes from. I get it. Like this is like, it's an authenticity thing, right? This is where it originated, and we're not just borrowing from it and putting it on our own platform. So we're actually going to meet the audiences where they're at and also bring new audiences in on this other platform. So I think if you're going to do it, like why not get it in front of as many eyeballs as possible?
Yeah, but at the same time, okay, just imagine this. If there's a brand and their entire Instagram feed is like 100
So true, yeah.
You know, is there room to put in a product image in between? Does that like, I just wonder kind of the... And maybe that's why we're seeing some of these brands test with maybe an 8 episode run or 3 or 5 episodes, because just thinking about the visual clutter on an Instagram feed in and of itself, like would be crazy.
Well, something I think that's interesting that sometimes brands will do is that they will kind of condense all episodes into one longer form video that can be like 3 total minutes long if your episodes are only 30 seconds.
1,000 episodes in 3 minutes.
In 3 minutes. And I think a good example of this actually is Maybelline. They did a holiday campaign at the end of last year where they did, I believe it was 5 episodes about their concealer product, and they put each individual episode out, but they also put it all together in one long-ish video that you could watch in one. So like if you were really curious on the storyline, you can just get it all done. But if it is in separate chunks, you can kind of like find different chunks of the story, and that could suck you in as well. I think we have a clip from it here if we want to take a look.
Maybelline presents Maybe This Christmas.
Maybe this Christmas will be different. Maybe, just maybe, I can conceal who I really am. But some things are harder to cover up.
Okay, legitimately hilarious.
I did like the, like, it's not, like, it's a concealer ad, but the whole thing is about her concealing her real identity as an inflatable, what is she, Mrs. Claus?
Yes, not a spoiler for the 3 minute
Sorry,
total
you guys,
series.
we're going to watch the 2 minutes. Yeah, she's Mrs. Claus. But yeah, I thought it was funny, like, because it's not inherently about concealer and their product, but like she does drop it out of her bag at one point, but it's mostly about like concealing her true identity, which I think is kind of creative.
Yeah, I do. And I mean, I think that just listening to it gives you the sense of like what a microdrama is all about. It's like there's going to be, yes, it's going to be campy. There's going to be a love story and misunderstandings, and there's going to be a secret, and there's going to be a twin. Like it is a soap opera. There's going to, a twin with amnesia who's evil. You know, like you just know exactly what you're getting.
Someone will fall in love. Someone might die. Who knows? I thought it was funny that this one particularly like almost takes on a horror tinge for a second. You're like, wait, is this a Christmas ad or a Halloween ad?
Why not both?
Why not both? You can do anything in 45 seconds per episode, really.
I feel like that's the thing too, is like it's funny and campy, but it's also like so low stakes. Like, yeah, you can watch the full 2 minutes and be like, that was fun, and move on. It's not like, oh, I'm invested in this long form series. I got to keep going back to it. I think like what I'm curious about when it comes to the cadence and releasing the episodes, like did Maybelline drop them all at once? Or were they like do you stagger this?
Yeah, I believe they dropped them all at once, but I don't think in my reporting so far I've come across a brand that has staggered them, which I think is a key part of the format, is that each episode will end on a cliffhanger, and if you can't get to the next like drop of the episode right away, I do think the magic of the microdrama kind of dies. And that is, I imagine, so much of the draw for a brand, is that you get that sustained like kind of engagement loop of like, oh my gosh, that episode was crazy, let me go to the next one. So I do think that staggering them kind of puts a stop to that. And it's interesting that that is a very different approach from another episodic show that I personally am very invested in. We've talked about it before on the show, Built's Roomies. Like they very specifically drop episodes, and they even did like a like season finale event recently for the season that they're on. And I think that speaks to the difference between the formats of like, okay, like you have to wait, and there is a little bit of like, there's production value here, whereas like a microdrama is like, we're making it all at once and we're putting it all out at once, and there's that engagement is a specific form of engagement to the format.
It really is like the new era of TV, because it's like, what's the difference between a soap opera and a prestige drama? It's like, well, how it comes out and how much production value there is and whatever. And I feel like, yeah, like going back to the social series that we've covered before, like I think that is the difference, because like even like the more like reality TV-esque series from like Kava, where they did Bowl Mates, like a dating series, it was always about like more of a traditional TV structure of like, we're releasing it once weekly, or we're doing a series or a season of this series. So I think this really lends itself to like the soap opera genre.
And I think there's a question again for brands who are releasing this on social. What is sort of the goal other than brand affinity or purchase, right? Like which I think are kind of the main ones, but like, are they looking for somebody to see that initial video and then follow the account and like get an update whenever there's a new episode? Or do they want someone to fall down the rabbit hole and spend 3 extremely engaged minutes watching every single second of all of this, and then they move on, but like they remember that, you know, experience of that thing that they watched that's like funny or totally interesting? I just think that those are 2 very different approaches. I think either one makes complete sense for a brand. It just really comes down to like, what is the goal here? Do you want someone to follow and come back week after week, or do you want them to like just lock in and watch the whole thing all at once?
Be deep in it. Yeah. I think something that kind of demonstrates that latter point is Unwell, Alex Cooper's ad agency, also did their own microdrama recently. And as I was watching it, I looked at the comments, and the comments are full of people being like, this is the only ad that I wanted to watch all the way through. Like, I can't wait to like watch the next one. What happens next? And that I think demonstrates that kind of engagement of like, I'm deep in it. And I think that's like every marketer's dream, social marketers in particular, of like, oh, you didn't want to scroll past this ad. Like, you were actually invested in it. And I think that speaks to like this particular form of storytelling too, right? Like, it's not hiding the fact that it's trying to hook you and it's trying to keep you in the loop. That is actually the point, and no one feels like they're being like tricked into staying for a long time. It's like, oh no, like I need to know what happens. I need to see where this goes next.
I feel like this is such a good example of how brands are really trying to become entertainment vehicles in and of themselves. Like, their marketing departments are saying, in some cases, we need a chief entertainment officer like at the helm of the company to help support marketing efforts that are so entertaining, so engaging that people actually want to be here. Because again, time and time again, we see the research that consumers don't love an ad break, but they love to laugh or like be entertained or, enjoy themselves. And so how does a brand actually do that? I think this is a very like wink and a nod way of doing it. Again, nobody feels tricked. You know exactly what's kind of happening. And there is this like tonal freedom, I think, for a brand. Like I would not expect Maybelline to like make a joke about concealment and like there's this like hidden secret identity. It doesn't feel to me like that's the immediate thing I would think of for a traditional TV ad from them, or even their social presence, like static images or things like that. This is such a fun way to try something, new and a little bit more fun.
I think it also, it taps into that idea of like brand relatability. Like we're funny, like look at us, like we're doing something that we know entertains you and like we're in on the joke. Like this is so unserious at the end of the day that I think people will look at Maybelline or whatever brand and be like, okay, they're funny. I like them.
Right. Yeah. It makes you feel like they get it, or they're like, they don't take themselves too seriously at the end of the day. I think something that's interesting too is that I think it opens up an opportunity for like wackier brand collaborations, if that's something you want to bring together in like one format, because the whole premise of a soap opera or a microdrama is crazy. Like things don't actually have to make sense. Like you can work with another brand that like you might not ever be able to work with in a more like serious tone, but just come up with a crazy storyline that puts together. And there's really no like questioning of that from the audience perspective most of the time. It's just like, okay, this is where this genre is going, so we're along for the ride. And I think that opens up a lot of like creative freedom for anyone who wants to engage in that too. And something that you said, Katie, I think it like a big piece of why I feel like any brand can do this is because the standards are lower, right? Like no one is expecting super glossy or super well produced or super well written. And I think that gives brands the ability to play and to test without being too worried about like, oh, like, did this come off correctly? Like, is this what we like really want to put forward? Because it's short and it can be forgettable, or you can lean fully in and like really put your whole effort into it.
It's kind of like the next phase of like unhinged marketing where it's like crazy, but it's not in the way that I think some people are getting tired of, where it feels like marketing, because it's not at the end of the day like an ad. I mean, it is kind of, but it's more about the entertainment value.
Yeah.
I do wonder though, do you think that there are brands that this doesn't make sense? It's too goofy, it's too unpolished, that a brand that may be part of their whole sell is that they are very polished, they're very presentable. I don't know. I'd love to know both of your thoughts there, because I wonder, like, is it truly for every brand? Do you really think it can be?
Totally. I think a really interesting example of that is Marc Jacobs actually did what they called a microdrama, and I would associate them as a very, very polished brand, like luxury, like has a certain type of connotation to it, right? And it's just one episode that's like a little bit silly, a little bit funny. It stars Rachel Sennett, and it doesn't actually lean that far into the tropes of microdramas. It's just a little bit more out of the box than Marc Jacobs typically would be. And calling it a microdrama kind of gave it a little bit of a boost, in my opinion.
Yeah, I felt like it was more of like a brand film.
Yes.
It didn't feel like a microdrama because it wasn't sequential. I mean, I think they're going to release new episodes, or they said they're going to one day.
Are. I haven't seen any.
It felt like a Safdie brothers movie. It was like very like stressful. Like she's trying to go to the Met Gala or get an invite, and like it was filmed in a more prestige way, I think, than most microdramas. Like you compare it to like Crocs, for example, and that felt like almost like an infomercial in the way that it was filmed. Like it looked very like, I don't know, like grainy and
Let's talk about the Crocs one, because Jenny gave us homework ahead of this episode. She was like, watch these, we can talk about it. And I feel like the Crocs one felt very much like, let's show off, what are the charms?
Gibbets.
The gibbets.
The product itself.
Yes, let's show off the gibbets. And these are a way to express yourself, and also maybe express that you have a crush on someone in your apartment building.
Crazy.
Maybe. And like, it's very cute, but it is very like product forward.
Yeah,
and I think that's one approach. And then versus the Marc Jacobs one, where the bag is sort of along for the ride of this character that played by Rachel Sennett. You know, it's just, I think it's kind of an interesting, like the question of subtlety or not. The genre is not subtle, but
not
is
at all.
the product placement subtle.
Yeah.
You know,
watching the Marc Jacobs one reminded me of just seeing like other random videos where it's not related to marketing, it's not related to a brand at all, but you see, like, you open the comments, people are like, oh my God, where's her bag from? And then someone comments like, it's in her shop, or it's in like whatever. And like, I think that was kind of the point. Like she never once mentioned her bag. She never once showed it off. It was just kind of there as like a side character. I think that
But
was
it's like beautiful
smart.
and glossy,
Yeah.
and there's like a nice big buckle on it.
It's noticeable.
Yes.
So like people watching it might be like, ooh, this was fun to watch. Where's her bag from? Oh, this is a video from Marc Jacobs. I want to look at the Marc Jacobs website now.
Yeah, definitely. Which I think is not pretty, like, typically how a microdrama approaches it. Like, I actually think the Crocs approach is a little bit more, like, it makes more sense for the genre because it is in your face. Like, everything about a microdrama, as you said, is not subtle. And the gibbets, I think, were cleverly used as part of the storytelling without it, like, it didn't need to hide that that was why we were here and that's what we were doing. And I think that's kind of the freedom of the content format, that like you don't have to kind of be subtle about it if you're not exactly a subtle brand. Whereas a luxury brand, like, I feel like no luxury brand is ever like, please buy our bag. Go to the website right now.
Yeah, but okay, so you have answered my question. I think that there are different executions in this that kind of maybe work for different tones and different things like that. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm convinced.
Great, amazing. I will say, I do think that there are risks, as we said. Like, it is like kind of a format that comes with lower standards, and I think like associating your brand with anything that people might say is lower standard is always a risk. Like, are you willing to be the butt of the joke, or are you kind of elevated in a way where you're like, like we would never be associated with anything that people would laugh at?
Yeah. I don't like foresee like a luxury like car brand or something making a microdrama, but I think like the Marc Jacobs example offers a way for like luxury brands that are thinking about it to do so.
The other thing that I particularly noticed in my recent suck into one is that AI is definitely being used in just like the general microdrama scene. And as we have talked about on the show a million times before, there is some controversy around AI usage, especially in creative fields. And I think if you are going to lean into that as a brand, are you going to use AI to kind of generate that? Or is this an area that you want to stay fully human in, even if like AI is pretty typical in this type of content? So it's something to consider for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've definitely talked about consumers wariness around AI use, and I think that is definitely, again, when we think about what does a consumer take away from this, like do they feel fun? Do they feel like a brand is in the know, or do they feel like does it leave a bad taste in their mouth? And I think that's definitely worth thinking about.
And I think if they use it in a way that's obvious, kind of going back to the brands that have used generative AI to like make fun of generative AI, it can land in a way that's more receptive to the audience. Like the Almond Breeze ad that came out earlier this year, where they like had the Jonas Brothers being pitched on a series of ads where it's like, do you want to be an AI generated astronaut or whatever? And it's like, that was the joke, was like, they didn't like it. So I think if the microdrama like taps into like the AI like fervor in a way that kind of like pokes fun at it, I think that could still resonate.
That would be really interesting to kind of just like use that as like part of the like over the topness rather than like actually creating the assets of the show itself.
You don't want to dupe your audience, but if you like make it over the top and very obvious, then I think that could be a way to like tap into the humor.
Right, definitely. Because even like right now, like the one that I was watching, I definitely watched an AI like Charlize Theron, and I was like, she's definitely not acting in microdramas. And people clock that and they're like, LOL, that's kind of funny. So I wonder if like you as a brand, if you're able to kind of like incorporate that into your message, like that's another layer of being like, LOL, we're right there with you. Like we get it.
Or you've just opened yourself up to getting sued.
I was gonna say, that's Charlize is cool with
So
it.
possible. Yeah, maybe not the A-list stars, but think about that. Iterate on that. Do you guys think that there is a brand that like really should tap into this? Is there a fun one that might get a good kick out of this for their audience?
I think going back to the idea that this is like the next era of Unhinged, I could see like a Duolingo doing a microdrama. I could see Taco Bell. I could see some of these brands that like tap into humor in a really fun way doing this. Liquid Death, maybe.
Yeah.
And I also actually think that Maybelline makes me think that there's a lot of space for beauty brands or even fashion brands to find like funny ways to find like a funny brand voice in a way that they previously like may not have tested out, because I do think that again brands are trying to find out the ways that works in different spaces, and I think this feels like such a playground for, you know, the stakes are low, the audiences are kind of know what they're getting, and you could probably learn quite a bit about what places you might be able to take your brand voice that you previously wouldn't have thought
Yeah.
were possible.
Definitely. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. And if you've been sucked into a microdrama lately, or you have thoughts on the content format as an advertisement, send us an email at mkbw@morningbrew.com, which you can also find in the show notes. And we'll catch you next week.